I want to tell you about the Monday morning that split my life into two clean halves, the woman I was before 6:17 a.m. and the woman who emerged afterward. My name is Megan Brooks. I am 32 years old, and for the past 9 years I have worked as a forensic accounting consultant in Boston. That means when companies suspect money has gone somewhere it shouldn't, through fake invoices, shell accounts, ghost employees, or unauthorized wire transfers, they call me. I am the person who follows the numbers when everyone else has given up or given in. I have sat across from CEOs who cried. I have watched vice presidents unravel when spreadsheets told the truth their mouths refused to. I have testified in proceedings, filed reports that ended careers, and handed attorneys evidence so clean it looked like fiction. I am very good at finding where money went. And on a Monday morning in March, I stood in my kitchen in bare feet, wearing a grey sweatshirt I'd slept in, one hand wrapped around a mug of black coffee, and I opened an email from my mother. The subject line was, "Enjoy your new life." I assumed it was another guilt trip. My mother, Susan Brooks, had a talent for passive aggression wrapped in the language of sacrifice. I expected something about how I never called enough, or how I had chosen my career over family, or how she and my brother Tyler were struggling while I was living my comfortable life in Boston. I had received dozens of those emails. I had learned to skim them the way you learn to skim terms and conditions. Eyes moving, nothing actually registering. So I opened it expecting to feel mildly irritated. Instead, I read these words. Your brother and I took your $450,000 savings and moved to Paris. Enjoy being broke. I read it once. My brain refused to process it. I read it again, slowly, the way you reread a word that suddenly looks misspelled even though you've read it 1,000 times. The words did not rearrange themselves. They sat on the screen exactly as cruel as they had appeared the first time. Attached to the email was a photograph. My mother, Susan Brooks, wearing oversized sunglasses outside a Parisian cafe, smiling with the unguarded pleasure of a woman who believed she had won something. Beside her stood my brother Tyler, holding a glass of champagne he absolutely could not have afforded the week before. They looked relaxed. They looked free. They looked like two people who had just solved a problem that had been annoying them. Beneath the photo, my mother had typed one final line. Maybe now you'll learn money doesn't make you better than family. The coffee mug slipped from my hand. It hit the kitchen floor and shattered, ceramic and black coffee spreading across the tile. I didn't move. I didn't reach for paper towels. I didn't call anyone. I just stood there, in the broken pieces and the spreading dark liquid, reading that email a third time. And something in me went very, very still. Not numb. Not in denial. Still, the way a person goes still when they understand exactly what has happened and realize that screaming would waste time they do not have. I have felt that feeling before, in conference rooms and courtrooms and client offices. It is the feeling that arrives when chaos resolves into a case file. I stepped over the broken mug. I sat at my dining room table. I opened my laptop. And I went to work. The first account dashboard loaded in seconds. Empty. I moved to the second. Drained. The third showed a wire transfer I had never authorized, routed through a temporary business entity with a name that made my jaw tighten. Brooks Family Holdings, LLC. My family had created a fake company. In our last name. As though theft becomes respectable when it has a corporate label. I kept digging, and with every click, the stillness inside me grew colder and more precise. Yes, my personal savings had been taken. $450,000 accumulated over 9 years of late nights, lost weekends, skipped vacations, and the particular kind of financial discipline that comes from growing up poor and deciding you would never feel that helpless again. But there was something else. There was movement in an escrow account connected to an active client investigation. I was mid-engagement for a medical technology firm that had hired me to trace embezzled research funds. That account had strict legal restrictions. It was monitored by an independent institution. It was insured under a compliance framework. And most critically, it was not my money. It had never been my money. It was protected client capital that happened to flow through a structure I managed professionally. My mother and brother had not just stolen from me. They had stumbled into a federal honeypot wearing stolen shoes. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Not from tears. From the slow, nauseating recognition of what they had walked into without understanding it. Then the memories began surfacing, one by one, like evidence exhibits in a mental filing cabinet. Tyler, last month, leaning in the doorway of my apartment kitchen. So do you keep all your money in one bank, or spread it around? My mother, insisting she needed to borrow my old laptop to print recipes during her last visit. The visit where she spent 20 minutes alone in my home office while I made us tea. Tyler's offhand joke during a video call. Your job sounds easy. Rich people just hand you their passwords and you count their money. I had dismissed every one of those moments as ignorance. Careless curiosity. The kind of questions people ask when they don't understand what you do and don't particularly care to learn. Now every casual question looked like a lockpick. I opened my password manager. Login from an unfamiliar device. 2 nights ago. Another login from an IP address linked to a short-term rental in New Jersey. They had not acted on impulse or in desperation. They had planned this. Deliberately. Over weeks. Then a second email arrived. Tyler this time. No subject line. 1 sentence. Don't try to play Detective Meg. You lost. I read that sentence twice. And something ancient in me, something patient and precise, answered back without making a sound. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I titled it Evidence, Brooks. And I began building the case. I called Natalie Parker first. Natalie is my best friend, has been since graduate school, and she is one of the few people in my life who has never once asked me to be smaller than I am. She answered on the second ring. She heard my voice say her name instead of hello, and she knew immediately. I have never been a person who leads with panic, so when panic leads instead, people who know me recognize it. I told her what happened. Not all of it, there wasn't time, but enough. The email. The photo. The drained accounts. The fake company. The client funds that might have been touched. Natalie didn't gasp. She didn't tell me to calm down. She didn't say, oh my God 17 times. She said, with absolute clarity, Megan, do not call them. Do not warn them. Build the file. That was why she was my person. By noon, my dining table had become a command center. Bank statements arranged chronologically on the left. Device access logs and IP records in the center. Email headers, complete with metadata, on the right. I had contacted 3 parties in order. The bank's fraud department, my firm's legal compliance officer, and then the client whose escrow account may have been accessed. Each call made my voice steadier. Each document made the betrayal feel less like heartbreak and more like evidence. My mother called at 3 in the afternoon. I let it ring. She called again. Then Tyler. Then my mother again. By the 5th call, she left a voicemail. I listened to it twice, not because I wanted to hear her voice, but because I needed to remember the tone. It was irritated. Clipped. The voice of a woman annoyed that her victim was not behaving properly. Megan, don't be dramatic. We're in Paris. We're finally happy. You should be happy for us. I saved the voicemail. Time-stamped it. Added it to the folder. That night, Natalie came over with food I couldn't eat and a notebook I could use. We sat across from each other while I wrote down every suspicious question, every convenient visit, every moment I had overridden my instincts because I wanted to believe family couldn't be this deliberate. The list was longer than I expected. And that was its own particular grief, realizing the warnings had been there, quiet and consistent, and I had chosen not to hear them. At 11:48 p.m., my phone lit up with an automated fraud alert from the escrow institution. High-risk international transfer under review. I read it once. And my pulse, which had been running fast all day, slowed. Not because things were fine. They were not fine. But because in that moment, I understood the full geometry of what my mother and brother had done. They thought they had robbed me and escaped to Paris. What they had actually done was pull a fire alarm inside a building full of investigators, lawyers, auditors, and federal compliance officers. And they were standing in the lobby holding the match. Rebecca Hayes had an office that overlooked the Boston Harbor. I barely saw it. I walked in the next morning carrying a folder so thick the receptionist glanced at it twice. Rebecca was the kind of attorney who made a room feel organized simply by being in it. She was calm in a way that did not feel distant, more like the calm of someone who had seen enough to know that clarity was more useful than alarm. She let me speak without interrupting. When I finished, she asked short, surgical questions. Who had physical access to your laptop in the past 6 months? Did your mother know your security questions? Did your brother ever receive mail at your address? Were protected funds actually transferred out, or only accessed? When she had what she needed, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Megan, I need you to understand something. This is not a family dispute. If your evidence holds, and from what I'm seeing, it does, this is identity theft, wire fraud, conversion of funds, and attempted theft from a legally protected escrow account." The words should have frightened me. Instead, they felt like solid ground under my feet for the first time in 36 hours. I had spent 2 days wondering if I was being too cold, too unforgiving, too unwilling to extend grace to people who were still, technically, my family. Rebecca's sentence ended that wondering. This was not drama. This was crime. She warned me about what came next. Family cases were ugly, she said, because people who share your DNA often believe they have immunity from consequences. They will say you chose money over family. They will call you cruel. They will position themselves as victims of your reaction rather than authors of their actions. They will try to make you feel responsible for the fallout of their own choices. I almost smiled, because she had described my mother perfectly. Susan Brooks had spent my entire childhood converting her needs into my debts. When I was 16, she borrowed my summer job money to keep the electricity on, then bought Tyler a gaming console the following week because he needed a win. When I was 21, she cried until I co-signed a small personal loan, then missed 3 consecutive payments and told me that bad credit would teach me humility. When I graduated, with a degree funded by scholarships and weekend bookkeeping shifts, not a dime of family money, she hugged me in front of relatives and whispered, "Don't forget who sacrificed for you." For years, she had trained me to confuse guilt with duty. Now she had simply scaled the lesson up to $450,000. Rebecca listened to those memories. She didn't need them legally, but she understood why I was offering them. When I finished, she said something that I have thought about nearly every day since. Manipulation often starts small. People don't steal $500,000 from someone unless they've already spent years practicing stealing smaller things: boundaries, time, money, peace. We filed that same afternoon. Fraud reports. Bank disputes. Preservation letters. A temporary restraining order against further account activity. A civil complaint naming Susan Brooks and Tyler Brooks as defendants. Rebecca also contacted the escrow institution's legal department directly to separate my personal loss from the protected client funds and to document that I had reported the breach immediately and had authorized nothing. That last part mattered enormously. My career ran on trust. My mother had put her hands not just around my money, she had put them around my professional name. By evening, the first account freeze landed. Brooks Family Holdings, LLC, locked. 2 international cards linked to the company, suspended. A luxury apartment booking in Paris, payment failed. Tyler texted me 20 minutes later, "What did you do?" I didn't answer. My mother sent a photo from a white tablecloth restaurant. Gold lighting. Small plates arranged like art. Below it, she wrote, "You can freeze cards, but you can't freeze family. Stop embarrassing yourself." I forwarded it to Rebecca. Her reply arrived in 3 words: excellent. More evidence. Social media, as it turned out, was my mother's second mistake. She posted vacation photographs with captions that read like victory laps. Finally free from toxic people. Tyler posted, "Some of us know how to enjoy life instead of hoarding money." Their friends liked the posts. A cousin commented, "So happy for you." I stared at that comment longer than I should have. My family had told their version of the story first. In their telling, I was the problem. The cold, money-obsessed daughter who had abandoned her people in favor of career success and now wanted to punish them for daring to finally live. Not one person in that comment section called to ask what had actually happened. Not one relative texted me to say, "Is everything okay?" That was the second betrayal. The quieter one. The chorus of people who chose a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable truth because the truth would have required them to do something. My Aunt Denise texted, "Your mother says you stranded them overseas." A cousin, "Whatever happened between you, don't involve police. She's still your mom." Someone else sent a Bible verse about forgiveness. Not a single one of them asked, "Why is she in Paris? Whose money paid for the flight?" I answered no one. Natalie suggested stronger language. Rebecca suggested restraint. I chose restraint, not because I lacked things to say, but because I had learned something years earlier in a deposition. The best witness is the one who says least and documents most. The courtroom would be my comment section. The legal record would be my response. So I went quiet. Not weak quiet. Strategic quiet. The kind of silence that lets arrogant people keep talking until they have said everything they needed to say to bury themselves. 3 days after the freeze, Rebecca called me with the update that confirmed exactly how far gone my mother's judgment was. They had tried again. Susan and Tyler, furious that their cards were declining and their apartment manager was threatening to evict them, had attempted to move another block of funds through the fake company, using my stolen identity documents, into a French banking application. They had tried to access restricted money after formal fraud dispute notices had already been filed against them. The bank's compliance system flagged it instantly. Their identities were now on record attempting to breach a frozen account while under active dispute. Rebecca said it flatly, "That's bad for them." 4 days after the freeze, at 2:03 in the morning my time, my phone lit up with my mother's name 11 consecutive times. I answered on the 12th. Rebecca had told me recorded calls could carry evidentiary weight in my state with proper disclosure, and Natalie was sitting beside me with her laptop open, ready to document. My mother didn't say hello. She said, "Do you have any idea what you've done?" For a moment, I almost admired the architecture of it. She had stolen my life savings, fled the country, mocked me in writing, and now she sounded wounded that consequences had arrived on schedule. I asked, very calmly, "Are you calling to return the money?" She laughed. But it cracked in the middle, that specific crack of a person who expected a different reaction and is scrambling to recalibrate. "Return it, Megan, don't be childish. That money was just sitting there. Tyler needed a reset. I needed peace. You have always had more than us." Natalie, beside me, closed her eyes like she was physically restraining herself. "You stole from me," I said. "You abandoned us first." Her voice sharpened. "You moved to Boston. You got your fancy degrees. You started acting like you were above your own blood. You think because you understand spreadsheets, you understand life." "Family asks," I said. "Thieves take." That was when Tyler grabbed the phone. I could hear street noise behind him, a Parisian evening, the ambient sound of a city he couldn't afford to be in. "You're ruining everything, Meg. The apartment manager is threatening to kick us out. Mom has been crying all day because of you." "Good," I said. The word surprised me too. Not because I didn't mean it, I meant it completely, but because I had never allowed myself to mean it before. Tyler went silent for half a second, recalibrating. "You always were selfish. Enjoy your lonely little life with your numbers." Then he said the sentence that erased the last soft corner of my heart. "You should be grateful we only took money." Natalie's head snapped up. Every cell in the room changed temperature. "What does that mean?" I asked. He hung up. I sent the call summary to Rebecca within the hour. By morning, the implication in Tyler's final sentence had been added to the file with a note about its potential significance. 7 days before the scheduled hearing, we received the evidence that changed everything. Subpoenaed internal records from the fake company account. Tyler had attached a note to one of the transfers. 4 words, casually typed like a grocery reminder. "Move before Meg notices." No confusion. No misunderstanding. No family emergency. Just intent, documented in his own careless handwriting. Rebecca called it a gift. I called it a confession with bad spelling. There was also a message from my mother to Tyler, sent 2 days before the theft. Recovered through the subpoena. She had written, "Once we're in Paris, she can yell all she wants. She won't be able to afford a fight." I read that sentence 3 times. Each reading removed something from me, but not something I needed. What it removed was the last remaining scrap of hope that this had been weakness, or desperation, or bad judgment clouded by love. My mother had not stolen because she was desperate. She had stolen because she believed financial destruction would silence me. She had planned it. She had strategized it. She had written it down. The grief I felt reading that sentence was clean. Not the messy grief of wondering if you've misunderstood. The clean grief of understanding perfectly. On Sunday night, Natalie stayed over. We ate takeout on the floor because the dining table was buried in legal binders. Around midnight, she asked me if I was scared. I told her yes. Not scared of losing the case, the evidence was overwhelming. Scared of walking into a courtroom and seeing my mother's face on a screen and knowing there was nothing between us anymore except documentation. Scared of the version of closure that doesn't feel like healing, just like a final door closing on a room you once thought was home. Natalie nodded. Then she said, "Be scared and go anyway." That was the last thought I held before I fell asleep. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined. In my mind, justice had marble columns, dramatic acoustics, the kind of lighting that makes everything feel historic. In reality, it had beige walls, a humming ventilation system, and a judge who looked as though he had seen too much to be surprised by any of it. Susan and Tyler appeared by video link from a legal office in Paris. 2 faces on a monitor. My family, reduced to a screen. My mother wore pearls. Of course she did. Tyler wore a wrinkled dress shirt and the expression of a man who had recently discovered that charm is not a legal strategy. Rebecca sat beside me. The bank's attorney was present. A representative from the escrow institution. My firm's compliance officer seated quietly at the back. And that, more than anything that had been said over the past weeks, was the moment I believe my mother finally understood she was not in a private family argument she could smother with tears. There were too many professionals in that room. Too many institutional interests. Too many people who did not love her, did not fear her, and did not owe her anything. Rebecca opened by laying out the timeline. Every element in sequence, delivered without a raised voice. Unauthorized device access. False company formation. Identity misuse. Personal savings drained. Attempted contact with restricted funds. International luxury spending. Continued attempts to access accounts after formal fraud notices were filed. Facts have a sound of their own when arranged correctly. They don't need drama. My mother's attorney argued confusion. His client had believed these were shared family resources. Rebecca showed the email. Enjoy being broke. He argued Tyler hadn't understood the account structures. Rebecca showed the note. Move before Meg notices. He argued there had been no malicious intent. Rebecca showed the message. She won't be able to afford a fight. The judge's face changed after that. Just slightly. A tightening at the corners of his mouth. A pause before his next notation. My mother was allowed to address the court. She leaned toward the camera. Her eyes were wet. Her voice carried the precise tremor that had once, for 32 years, caused me to fold. Your Honor, I am a mother. I made mistakes, but I was trying to help my son. Megan has always been successful. She has everything. Tyler has struggled. I thought that, as a family, we could balance things out. Balance. That was the word she chose. For theft. The judge asked whether I had provided written authorization for the fund transfers. Susan looked down. Not written, no. Verbal authorization. A pause. As her mother, I believed. That is not what I asked. The silence that followed was the first honest thing my mother had produced in that courtroom. Then Tyler spoke, which was his final mistake. Look, Megan is making this bigger than it is. She's always been dramatic about money. We were going to pay her back once things settled. Rebecca stood. With what income, Mr. Brooks? Tyler blinked. Excuse me. You were terminated from your position during this period. Correct. That happened because of all this. Because you left the country while misrepresenting your work location to your employer. Correct. He looked away. Before your termination, your savings balance was under $2,000. Correct. He muttered something. The judge asked him to answer clearly. Yes. So when you say you intended to repay $450,000 plus applicable fees and damages, what specific repayment plan existed? Tyler had no answer. My mother began to cry harder. And for the first time in my life, those tears landed on me like rain on sealed glass. I registered them without absorbing them. Then Rebecca requested that I be permitted to address the court. I stood. For one terrifying second, I forgot how to breathe. I looked at the screen, at my mother's pearls, at Tyler's resentment, at the judge's waiting stillness, and I began. I loved my family. That is why this worked for so long. Not because I was careless with my money, but because I trusted people who knew exactly how to use trust as a tool. My mother did not ask for help. My brother did not make a reckless mistake. They planned to take my savings, leave the country, and leave me too financially damaged to fight back. They were wrong that I am not here because I hate them. I am here because love without accountability becomes permission, and I am no longer available to be the person who absorbs the consequences of other people's cruelty and calls it family loyalty. I want my funds restored. I want my name protected. And I want the record to reflect that being someone's daughter does not make me their bank. The courtroom went quiet. My mother covered her face. Tyler stared at the floor. The judge recessed for 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes were longer than the entire month before them. When the judge returned, he granted the emergency relief. My personal funds were to be restored through a combination of frozen assets, reverse transfers, and lien against secured property. The fake company account would remain frozen pending further proceedings. The attempted contact with the protected escrow funds would be referred to appropriate investigative authorities for review under federal statutes. Susan and Tyler were ordered to surrender control of connected financial accounts and preserve all records. And then came the consequence that made Tyler's composure finally crack. The court authorized liens against my mother's Ohio home and Tyler's remaining assets to secure full repayment and associated damages. My mother's voice came through the screen sharp and disbelieving. My house. The judge looked at her directly. You used stolen funds to finance an international relocation while taking active steps to prevent the plaintiff from seeking legal remedy. The court is not persuaded by your claim of innocent misunderstanding. My mother's face hardened. The mask, the one she had worn my entire life, the careful combination of wounded and righteous, slipped into the microphone, just loudly enough to be heard, after everything I did for her. Everyone in that room heard it, including the court reporter. Even her grief, in the end, became evidence. There is no music when you walk out of a courtroom having one. I sat on a hallway bench and shook. Not from weakness, from the release of 32 years of held tension, finally given permission to leave my body. Natalie sat beside me and wrapped both arms around me without saying a single word. She knew that was what I needed. Not analysis. Not celebration. Just the presence of someone who had never required anything from me except my actual self. I had won. My money would be recovered. My career was safe. My name was cleared. The record would reflect, permanently, that what happened to me was not a misunderstanding or a family dispute but documented financial crime. And yet, I had also lost something. The last illusion that blood relation automatically meant safe harbor. That the word mother was a guarantee of protection rather than just a description of biology. In the weeks that followed, the consequences I had watched build from my evidence folder began landing in their lives in real time. Tyler was unable to find new employment once the civil filings and circumstances of his termination became part of his record. His Paris photos stopped. His friends stopped responding. My mother returned to Ohio quietly, not victorious, not vindicated, just smaller. Her house sat under a lien. She tried selling jewelry, furniture, then the story that I had ruined her life. But narratives do not satisfy judgments, and sympathy cannot unlock frozen accounts. Some relatives came back once the facts became undeniable. My Aunt Denise sent a long message explaining that she should have asked questions before assuming I was the problem. A cousin invited me to Thanksgiving as though a holiday dinner could cover the smell of betrayal. I thanked no one for finally believing evidence. Maybe that sounds cold. But there is a specific and exhausting quality to being asked to feel grateful toward people who only stopped hurting you when proof made denial embarrassing. 3 months after the hearing, my mother sent a final email. Subject line: please. I almost deleted it unread. But some part of me needed to know which version of her had survived the wreckage. It was short. Megan, I don't know how we became this. I miss my daughter. I made choices I regret. Tyler is angry. I am tired. I wish we could go back. No confession. No clear apology for the theft. No acknowledgement that she had attempted to leave me financially ruined and alone. Just regret, soft, shapeless, the kind that wants comfort without the cost of accountability. I opened a reply and typed, "We cannot go back because the person I was before no longer exists. I hope you find honesty someday. But I will not be part of your life while you are still learning it." I sent it. I blocked her email. I sat in the silence for a long time. I forgave my mother eventually. Not in the way the word is usually meant. Not by reopening a door she had burned. Not by pretending Tyler was simply lost rather than deliberate. Not by absorbing their story into my own history as a lesson I was supposed to learn with grace and gratitude. I forgave them by refusing to let their betrayal stay at the center of my life. I forgave them by sleeping through the night again. By checking my bank accounts without my hands shaking. By laughing over terrible coffee with Natalie. By taking new clients and trusting myself to do good work. By buying a small condo with locks only I controlled, a dining table that was just a table, covered in nothing but ordinary objects, used for nothing but ordinary meals. The lesson in all of this was not complicated. Family is not a license to steal your peace, your savings, your professional name, or your future. Blood explains a biological connection. It does not excuse cruelty. It does not create debt that must be repaid in silence. It does not transform theft into sharing or fraud into love. My mother thought that draining $450,000 from my accounts would leave me too broken and too broke to fight her. What she did not know was that the moment she made the choice to treat me as a resource rather than a person, she had already lost. Because you cannot rob someone of their character. You cannot drain an account that contains what someone knows, what someone has built in themselves, what someone becomes when they finally stop asking permission to protect their own life. I spent 9 years learning to follow money through the darkest corners of corporate fraud. My mother handed me a case file with our last name on it. I followed it exactly where it led. If you have ever been betrayed by someone you were supposed to trust unconditionally, remember this. Protecting yourself is not cruelty. Asking for justice is not revenge. Walking away from people who only value you when you are useful to them is not betrayal. It is survival. And sometimes, surviving is the most courageous thing you will ever do.